everybody, and you're all very welcome to today's event. I want to thank you all for attending. I want to thank you for your interest, and above all, I want to thank you for your commitment. And I think the venue that we have today is very appropriate, given the philosophy of Cultivate. And I want to thank John, Michael, and Dick Budden as well from the project team for all their work, and also thank Matt Toomey and all of his staff who are working probably most directly with the group. 8 weeks ago, I woke up and I discovered I was sleeping with a granny. And it's a fairly traumatic experience. Our first grandson, our first grandchild was born. And I suppose when I look at him now, I say to myself, will he have some of the opportunities at least that all of us have had during our lifetime? That to me is what sustainability is about. Now you were all supposed to say that I didn't look old enough to be a grandfather, but I noticed none of you did that. We then have what's going on in the financial world, and we've all seen the problems of the last few weeks. And I suppose the analogy there is this, that you just cannot keep accumulating without consequence. And that's very much again about sustainability. And there are several definitions of sustainability. One of the best ones I thought, was by Seneca, who was a Roman senator who lived back between 5 BC and 60 AD. And that was a long time before the Rio Declaration. He said, it should be such that you enjoy present pleasures in such a way as not to injure future ones. And the Romans were good on pleasures, but you can see the sense of what he was saying. The trouble is mankind has been a slow learner, and we now have created a lot of problems. So that's, I suppose, a way of trying to simplify sustainability. Many of you will have heard me talking about a vision for the city, about it being a creative, sustainable city, but yet being distinctly Dublin, with that vibe that makes us distinctly Dublin, which is what attracts an awful lot of people here. And being a creative and sustainable city is what will give us our competitive edge. And if you like, Ireland Inc. is in a bit of trouble at the moment. But maybe that's an opportunity to make Dublin Inc. a more valid proposition as the economic driver in Ireland. And we've mentioned these 6 themes as being essential for driving the success of the city: the economic, the social, the cultural, the environmental or sustainability, urban form, and movement of people. And sustainability has many interpretations in terms of the city itself, be it social or otherwise, but today we're talking very much about the sustainability aspect. And why I've been mentioning these themes is that it's more about the cross-functional aspect of what we do. You know, we have departments, but they shouldn't be silos in terms of not understanding what the if you like, the result of your actions will be across both the city council itself or indeed across the city. And sustainability is probably the best example of how we can work cross-functionally to make a better city. Someone gave me an article from The Guardian in the Guardian newspaper in the last couple of days, and there was an article arising from a UN report. And it said the world is facing a natural resource crisis far worse than the financial crunch, and that humanity is currently using 30% more resources than is sustainable, that we will require the equivalent of 2 planets worth of resources by 2030, and that if everyone on the planet was to consume what we consume in Ireland, then we'd need 5 planets. So clearly, something fundamental has to change. Now, if you look at those statistics, you probably wouldn't get up in the morning, because you'd say the problem is so immense that it would be so difficult to actually deal with it. But I was talking to somebody earlier this morning, and they came up with a beautiful phrase about big problems are disguised in a cloak of impossibility. The moral being that if you chip away at them and if you pull back the cloak, they're not so impossible at all. So we must be continuously motivated about doing what we can in relation to what we are responsible for, which is Dublin. And that's our focus, and we can make a difference, and we are making a difference, and John alluded to some of the examples, and I'll touch on those in a moment. But as with everything in life, if you're finding it hard to deal with these concepts or deal with the massive nature of the issues involved, make it simple. Was it our Lord said that when you close one door, you open another? And if you simplify that down into simplicity, it might be as simple as closing a door to remove the draft to be able to turn the heating down by 1 degree. So make it simple, just 1 degree. And you know about the Small Steps campaign, that everything we do is just about making that difference and about awareness. You know, it could be one small step like we had in the pedometer challenge, and I see that 3 of our groups featured very highly in the city pedometer challenge, and I think one of our groups actually won it, didn't it? Yeah. So just looking at some of the examples, the climate change strategy, and Dublin City Council is leading the way. And then, as somebody said, you can have all the strategies in the world, but strategy without action is hallucination. And they're right. So you bring that down to a more realistic level when you talk about the energy action plan. We have the biodiversity plan adopted. There's the whole rehabilitation of the water infrastructure, the green roof policy. We have something like Father Collins's Park, which is going to be a hugely sustainable project, and I'm sure Jerry Barry will tell any of you who wants to find out more about that. We have the apartment guidelines, which again is a sustainability initiative because it's about trying to bring families back into the city centre and reduce that necessity for commuting to far-flung areas outside of the city. The Ark Street Apartments, a very good example of a development we've done ourselves in terms of sustainability living. I've mentioned about the pedometer challenge, and we're also engaged in this action at work on the recycling. So keep thinking about making a difference, even if it's only just 1 degree. So we need to make initiatives such as those I've just mentioned, the rule rather than the exception. How do we get Dublin City Council, and by extension the city, to engage and to agree on a basic framework for sustainability, and then slowly evolve the way to live as being more sustainable? Now, the natural steps is one example, and that's the example we're embracing, and you're going to hear a lot more about that today. John calls it the framework for strategic sustainable development. I think John will have to actually simplify that as part of the discussion today. And maybe one of the ways of making it simple is we have taken the decision as part of continuing the development of the performance management development system is to make sustainability down to the simplest level as part of the conversation, as part of the team development plan, and indeed as part of the personal development plan under PMDS. And again, it's all about simplifying what we're about and being practical. This whole issue of change is omnipresent. We have the environmental, the financial, the health, transportation, all of the issues that we need to change for a more sustainable society. But people must understand what this means for them and why it is required. But I would say the world is changing. You know, I'm not being political, but is the result in America last night an example of change? I would certainly say it's at one level, it's a rejection of the Bush environmental policies at the very least. So is there a change of mindset? And we all need to be developing that change of mindset. So can it be said that we're reaching a milestone in our collective understanding where we suddenly realize, almost simultaneously, that the way we have designed the process of living is inadequate or suddenly not fit for purpose? And that's why we're involved in another initiative which is called Creative Dublin. And I'm just after coming from a meeting of the Alliance of People, the universities, business, and the City Council who are involved in that. And one of the fundamental principles there is, how can we look at our education system, for example, in getting young people more involved in design thinking than simply going through a process of education which is based upon memory? So thinking about the world around them and what needs to be designed to make a better place. We do know that business as it stands and as usual is not going to work. And we can't plan for the future exclusively by looking at the past. So, I quote Daniel Lurch there, who has pointed out that climate and energy uncertainty means that local authorities, for example, can no longer plan on the basis of how we've always done things. So that's why we're all here together today. All of you can actually help. And I've said this before, I think there is huge intelligence and so on within the City Council, and we should be able to mobilise that to make a difference and to unlock that creativity, knowledge and enthusiasm that is being expressed by people being here today. Your mindset has been changed. How are you going to change the mindset of other people in the organisation? And I'm sure each of us can envisage the kind of society we'd like to maintain for the future and the characteristics of such a place. Einstein said you can't predict the future, but you can certainly work to invent it. And that comes back to that issue about the cloak of impossibility. If you were living in Einstein's time, you wouldn't have dreamt of what the world could achieve in the following 100 years. I've been reading a very interesting book recently by James Martin called The Meaning of the 21st Century. And, despite all of the difficulties of the world, which he very correctly describes in the book, he talks about the potential over the next 10 years to make this the best century of all time. Now, if you don't take the right decisions, you could make it a very, very difficult century. So, we need to lift our heads and put our daily work in context and enable it to inform our actions and policies so that we can begin to move step by step to a better future. I was going to use an analogy here, I think I'll use it anyway, about having your heads up and being aware about what's around you. And I was going to use I'm very interested in sport, as some of you will know. I was going to use the example of Kilkenny hurling. And anybody who knows me will know how hard I find it to use Kilkenny as an example, being a Tipperary man. But, take them after winning 3 All-Irelands. Their heads are up, they're aware of what's around them, and they make it look simple. But that's all based, because behind that, and they've done things which they probably thought not possible themselves, but behind all of that there's awareness. Above all, there's motivation and spirit. And the trainer himself has alluded to that as being the most critical point. And then there's training, but above all, there's application. And in some ways, that describes the 4 steps that you talk about in the natural steps. So there, I found that hard to do, but anyway, in terms of how we move forward then in terms of the more strategic level. As has been pointed out, the City Development Plan is a very important document because it sets out our collective intent for a future Dublin. And sustainability, because it's even incorporated in the legislation now, is an absolutely central element of that. And we're going to have to be bold in our thinking and brave in our approach to how we treat that subject within the development plan. We're going to also have to be, I think, more bolder in terms in how we participate with the public and we capitalise on the ideas out there among our public. Because this is going to be about a vision for a much longer period than just the development plan period. And the community, if they don't buy into whatever we talk about in terms of sustainability, we will simply be doing things within our own organisation as opposed to doing it at a citywide level. And that's the purpose of tomorrow, where we begin to talk to agencies outside of ourselves and see what level of buy-in we can actually develop in that regard. And I suppose the City Development Plan and our discussions are going to determine how far we actually go on the sustainability issue in the next City Development Plan in taking us forward to developing a more sustainable city. Part of that is agreeing on exactly what sustainability means, because it is a little bit like motherhood and apple pie at the moment. We need to share a common understanding of sustainability across our own organisation, which is going to allow us to work more effectively. And we need the framework, which is what we're talking about, but we also need people and each other to make a difference. All about the mindset and making a difference. There's no doubt that people today are very worried about the correction in the financial markets. But, where there's difficulty, there's always opportunity. And isn't it an opportunity on the other hand, because it presents an opportunity that when the next upturn comes, maybe we will make it more sustainable. For our part, we want to make our processes to evolve so as to be more resilient, flexible and strategic. We want Dublin City Council. I haven't put down to become the most sustainable local authority in the world or anything like that. How do you measure something like that? But we do for ourselves want to be an extremely sustainable local authority and do everything within our power in that regard. And I'm looking forward to hearing the words of Dr. Robert in helping to chart the way forward. The challenges are major, but we can make a difference. And just for me personally, every time I look at my new grandson, I realise why I have to make a difference. Thank you very much.